Okay folks, our next question is question 5, and you can see it. Simplify the following expression without the use of a calculator. Now that usually means you're going to use your identities, or you're going to use special angles, and then also your reduction formulae. Okay, so you've got to reduce these angles to first quadrant angles first of all, and then you're going to decide, well, is this like going to work with identities, or is this going to be me applying my special angles? Now let's analyze again, folks. Again, you don't just start off and do what you want to. Analyze the question. Okay, let's see, where does this angle lie? Now in your head, folks, you're clever enough to do this. In your head, 325 lies over there. And you ask yourself, how far is it away from the horizontal line? And you'll see the answer to that is it's 35 degrees below the 360. Okay, this is a first quadrant angle. I don't want to touch it. This one here lies that negative. Remember, there is no such a thing as an angle that takes on a negative value. It just cannot. How can the size of something be negative? So in trigonometry, this negative represents a direction, and that direction is clockwise direction. So I go clockwise 145 degrees, and I see that I'm in the third quadrant. And then you ask yourself the sneaky question, how far am I away from the first horizontal? So how far is this angle away from 130? And again, 180 rather. Again, you will see it's 35 degrees. Okay, and this last one, in your head, quickly ask yourself which quadrant, and it is in the third quadrant. How far is it away from the horizontal? And it's 35. Now look at the poetry here. 35, 35, 35, 70. So this is going to be treated as a double angle for the sine of 70. Okay, now we know where we're going. So our first step. I'm not going to touch this yet. I'm first working on, first working on getting everything into the first quadrant. So the sine of 70 is in the first, and at this stage I'm going to suggest you use brackets, folks. Sine in the fourth quadrant is negative, and because it's 360 minus 35, it will be the sine of 35 degrees minus the sine of 35. Okay, so there we go. In the denominator, I saw that this is in the third quadrant. Cosine is negative in the third, and it's 35 degrees away from 180. You will notice I do not approach the vertical reduction formula yet. I reduce it horizontally. I promise you, you will not make a mistake or go off on a tangent if you only focus on horizontal first. We can look at vertical just now if there's an option for vertical. Okay, so this is twice the cosine. Now be careful. Put your bracket down. Put the square outside of that bracket. In the third quadrant, cosine is indeed negative. Okay, and it becomes minus the cosine of 35 degrees. Now everything is in my first quadrant. Now I'm happy. So now I'm going to make the informed choice. I am going to expand this as twice the sine of 35 degrees multiplied by the cosine of 35 degrees. This negative divided by that negative dissolves itself. So I have a positive sine 35 outside the bracket and a positive cosine 35 in the denominator. Plus twice. A negative squared is a positive, and then I just have the cosine of 35 degrees. Now this is, I promise you, where you're going to make your mistake, is if you don't use a bracket immediately and put the square outside the bracket, you are going to say that this thing reduces to minus the cosine squared of 35, and you fell into the trap that we set there for you. Okay, let's see. the cos of 35, cos of 35. Why can I cancel this? Because all of these things are multiplied with one another. There's no terms involved. So I may get rid of those two. After I've done that, I'm left with twice the sine squared of 35. I've got sine 35 times sine 35. Plus twice the cosine squared of 35 is what's left in the second term. And you can see, if you remove the 2, you have left sine squared 35 degrees plus cosine squared 35 degrees. And for all intents and purposes, that is 1. So there we go. You have your result as 2. Okay, so folks, please listen to what I've shown you here. Have a mental picture in your head of where this is. Okay? Those of you that are battling with that, you can go into the quadrant then and say this is 360 minus 35, that is 180 plus 35, and that this is 180 plus 35. Okay, so what you have to do and do accurately are these 3 reductions. That's the first thing. The second important point, only do horizontal first. Okay, once everything is in the first quadrant, then you can start deciding, am I going to apply the identities or do I need to go vertical?